All right, guys, doing a little something different today. So I'm gonna wait a minute, let some people get on. I still haven't shared this out even, and yeah. Yeah, day off today. Haven't I don't know if you can tell in the background here, guys, but it is an off day in Florida. It's not sunny and bright. It's cloudy. Enough natural light that I can do this, but go ahead and turn this on, I guess. That helps out a bit. And we're gonna do a Stony Progressive middle of the day workout. Um, just gonna try a little something new. I did not get to my NPR last night because we had thunderstorms and the power went out. I'm supposed to have thunderstorms today around 2 or 3, so I'm going to try to get this all taken care of. Let's get our NPR takedown, NPR review over before 2 o'clock, get a little workout in, and have a good weed afternoon. So while we get a few people on, while we make sure YouTube and my links are shared out, I am going to get my drink ready. All right. So for my workout, I'm going to be sipping on, again, I'm a vegetarian, vegan, mostly. So I have Amino Lean. It is a pre-workout that's keto and vegan friendly. No unnatural sugars. So I'm going to start sipping on this while I stretch and smoke. And then we'll get a workout in while we listen to some NPR. Like I said, we're going to hang out for a minute while we get on. Usually do this at midnight, and I usually just do, news reviews. So if you are joining me for the first time ever, because I am doing this, I'll be trying to do this on a weekly basis. I am a bartender who runs around a lot but doesn't work out. Zero working out for the last couple of years. So I am taking a break from bartending, and I'm going to work out this month. Get ready for gardening and bartending this summer. But for the moment, I'm going to work out to stay in shape. So today is day 1. You guys are joining me on my Stony Progressive day 1 of actual workout. Like I say, I'm active, but I don't work out. So this is my from sedentary to working out, day 1. We'll see how it goes. Right. I'm getting you live here on YouTube. I am currently holding, if it starts playing, I got President Biden on the background here on my YouTube channel. President Biden delivers remarks on the assistance the U.S. is providing to Ukraine. So that's going to pop up randomly when he goes live, and I'll pause the NPR and take a second to switch over to that for a second. But for now, like I said, this is completely original and new, so don't expect a mass push here at any time. So let's start. Let's get moving. So we're going to do NPR on my podcast. and work out. First thing we're going to do is the news roundup from March 11th. I know it's almost a week ago already, but I wanted to do this workout on Saturday night, but I had an anxiety attack, which working out, yoga, things like this will help deter that from happening again.
Not everybody wants to run around the White House or Congress all day. That's where the NPR Politics podcast comes in. At 5 p.m., NPR's best political reporters get together and break down the biggest political stories. No noise, just friends making sense of Washington. Listen to the NPR Politics podcast every weekday.
Hey, it's Jen. Just a quick heads up before we start the show. The news is rapidly developing and things may have changed by the time you hear this episode. For the latest news, tune into your public radio station and follow updates at npr.org. You're listening to the 1A podcast. Let's jump into the news roundup. The war in Ukraine has entered its third full week, and the U.S. is continuing to squeeze Russia's economy. Several big companies and news organizations left Moscow this week, either by choice or by force.
If you get on, let me know how the volume is.
What does Russia's increasing isolation mean, and is it helping Ukraine? We'll get into it, but first we start on Capitol Hill. Congress passed its first major government spending bill under the Biden administration, once again narrowly avoiding a government shutdown. Joining us is Joshua Meyer, a domestic security correspondent for USA Today. Josh, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Jen.
Also with us, Cheryl Gay Stolberg, a Washington correspondent for the New York Times. Cheryl, always great to have you on.
Thanks, Jen.
And Anita Kumar, the senior editor of Standards and Ethics at Politico. Anita, thanks for joining us again.
Great to be back.
So this spending package, the first major spending package Biden has ever gotten to sign. Anita, any idea why this one managed to make it through a notoriously polarized Congress?
Eventually, one of them has to get through, right? Congress needed to fund the government to keep the government funded and operating. But they had been working on this for months. This isn't something, although it did happen, it's not something that just has been worked on. It's been months of negotiations as Republicans and Democrats tried to come together. What's interesting is that they did raise spending, right? They've increased spending both for defense and non-defense. And of course, that's been one of the big sort of philosophical differences here in what Republicans and Democrats wanted. And so that did include that. It did include aid for Ukraine and Eastern European countries, which was very important. Did not end up including this COVID money that the White House had wanted, which was a huge disappointment to Democrats.
Now, the package was broken into two chunks. What was the strategy there?
Well, I think it's generally done that way because the defense spending is always sort of looked at in a particular way. And so I think that wasn't too different, but they had different amounts of increases in spending in each of those two areas.
Now, Democrats in the House say they had to leave out COVID relief aid to get it passed in time. And here's Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi.
On the COVID relief bill, unfortunately, you had to have 60 votes in the Senate, and we couldn't get 60 votes without taking money out of the state allocations that were in the rescue package. And that Republican obstruction required that we pass, now taking it off this bill, to separate legislation containing funding to continue the fight against COVID. Again, sadly, the Republicans insisted that every penny for the COVID be offset.
Cheryl, how much COVID aid was ultimately cut, and what will be the impact of losing it?
Well, the White House initially asked for $22.5 billion in aid. Congress whittled that down to $15.6 billion in a package that they thought was going to pass. But as you heard Speaker Pelosi say, Republicans were insisting that that money be offset. And the way they were going to offset it, in part, was to take $7 billion from states. Governors balked, and the whole thing collapsed. And this is a problem for the White House. The White House and the Biden administration are out of money for therapeutics and tests and vaccines, and they say they need to sign contracts if they want to ensure an adequate supply of monoclonal antibodies. For instance, those monoclonal antibodies will be gone by May. The stock will be out. By July, the administration is going to run out of another antibody drug that is used to prevent COVID in immunosuppressed people. So inside the White House, the COVID response team is very nervous about this and fearing that, it is possible that we could have another variant, and they want to be prepared.
So is there any chance that the relief could come back up for another vote?
Honestly, right now things look pretty grim. What I'm hearing is that it is possible that it might come up again the next time the administration asks for another Ukraine aid package. But, we've just gotten $14 billion in military and humanitarian assistance for Ukraine. That should last a while. So it's unclear how soon another package for Ukraine would come up, and thus it's unclear how soon another COVID vote would come out. It seems like Republicans and Democrats are really at an impasse over this. And it also seems that it stems from a Republican sentiment that they don't want to spend any more money on COVID and they think it's over. And a lot of public health experts don't think it's over. They think that we are having a lull, cases are declining, that's a good thing, but that the administration really does need to be prepared because this is an unpredictable virus, as we have seen.
Now, you mentioned the $14 billion in Ukraine aid. According to the New York Times, it's double the amount the Biden administration asked for. We'll get it further into the U.S. and Ukraine in a bit, but do we know if this aid is for anything specific, Cheryl?
The aid is designated for specific things. About half of it will go to the Defense Department so that it can send troops to the region and defense equipment to Ukraine. I think about $4 billion or so would be humanitarian aid, and that is to provide support for refugees fleeing Ukraine and people who are displaced. There's need for emergency food assistance. I think there's some money in there, about $2 billion for economic aid to provide, needs for Ukraine and neighboring countries like cybersecurity and energy issues. And also it includes some money, a small amount, relatively small in Washington standards, $25 million, for the U.S. Agency for Global Media, which is an independent federal agency to combat disinformation in newscasts abroad.
Anita, before we move on, the Senate also passed a significant piece of legislation this week, the Postal Service Reform Act. What's in the bill and why is it a priority?
Well, this is a bill, it's a $107 billion bill that's really trying to modernize the Postal Service. It's a bit controversial because this is something that the Postmaster General, and this is the sort of Donald Trump aligned Postmaster General, had been pushing. And so there were some Democrats who were skeptical of it. In the end, it went through, but it was changed. This bill was changed. So it really deals with putting it on a better financial footing. So it removes $57 billion in past due postal liabilities. It eliminates $50 billion in payments over the next 10 years. So it requires future postal retirees to enroll in Medicare. So it's trying to basically make the Postal Service more financially stable. There were a lot of other pieces that Republicans and Democrats talked about that were part of this package to really change some of the ways that the Postal Service were working. Some of those got through, but a lot of those didn't, and it's something that they'll continue to talk about it, but sort of was pretty controversial at this point. President Biden has signaled that he intends to sign the legislation, so it should go through.
Well, let's move to Eastern Europe. This week, the Pentagon rolled out any U.S. participation in efforts to send warplanes to Ukraine.
Sovereign nations can decide for themselves what they want to do, but this idea, the proposal of transferring these jets to our custody, for them transferring to Ukraine, that is something that we are not going to explore right now.
That was Defense Department spokesperson John Kirby on Wednesday. Josh, so as Kirby just alluded to, the Pentagon's refusal was in response to a plan proposed by Poland. What was in that plan and what's its future now?
Well, it's a good question. I think that there's been some miscommunication between the Pentagon and the State Department because as basically Tony Blinken last week greenlit the idea of transferring the planes through Poland to Ukraine and then backfilling them with F-16s, giving Poland much newer U.S.-made fighter jets. But then when Poland sort of surprised everybody by saying that they wanted to give the jets to the United States and then have them give them to Ukraine, the United States balked on that. And so yesterday, Lieutenant General Scott Barrier, who's the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, testified on the Hill that the reasoning behind that is that they thought that this was part of an escalation ladder in which this was much more of a significant escalation than providing anti-aircraft missiles and other kinds of weapons. So their concern is that Russia would take this as a much more direct confrontation. Fighter jets can cross over into Russian territory, what Barrier said, and so they're very concerned that it sends the wrong message to Putin, who is also very unpredictable. So nobody really knows where his red line is, and I think that they're very concerned about crossing it.
So briefly, what does that mean moving forward?
We don't know. I mean, I think, Vice President Harris is in Poland, was in Poland yesterday, and Romania today. She's trying to sort of smooth things out, I think, and clean up, as we said in the story, clean up the political messaging and figure out what to do.
We'll get into more of the week's biggest headlines after the break. Remember to join future conversations. Download our 1A Vox Pop app and leave us a voicemail.
The connection that happens between people and message come from better helpful and how human sections are prevalent.
Putin chose this war, and now he and his country will bear the consequences.
This podcast breaks down what all this means. Get the latest from the NPR Politics Podcast.
Thanks for the follow. It's a very new,
Over this last year and a half,
very new day to me.
I've been through a lot. So I'm.
This is a new segment, Stretching at NPR, and I just have to say that I am not going to be happy with their news today.
Season of Historical Podcast.
Oh,
We'll
NPR
hear stories
sucks.
reminding us that even when times are hard, we can still begin again. Listen to our new season wherever you get your podcasts.
It's the News Roundup. We're rounding up some of the week's biggest headlines. Let's get back to the conversation. Well, Vice President Kamala Harris is in Eastern Europe on a diplomatic trip. She's in Romania today. She pledged more humanitarian support for Poland on Thursday and assistance in managing the wave of refugees crossing into the country from Ukraine.
When we talk about humanitarian aid, it is because, yes, the assistance is necessary, but what compels us also is the moral outrage that all civilized nations feel when we look at what is happening to innocent men, women, children, grandmothers, grandfathers, who are fleeing everything they've known.
More than 2 million people have fled Ukraine. The U.S. promised to help Poland handle the influx of refugees. But Cheryl, how exactly will we be doing that?
Well, I think that, Poland is asking for direct assistance. I assume that's going to be cash assistance. Kamala Harris was sent there not only to talk about refugees, but also to kind of smooth over the frayed ties between Poland and the United States.
Kamala Harris was sent there because they don't know what else to fucking do with her. Kamala Harris was sent there because they have no clue what to do with that lady.
That had erupted over the dispute over the MiG fighters that Poland was going to send through the United States to Ukraine, the offer that the United States rejected. It became very complicated. She went over there also to establish her own bona fides, I think, as a foreign policy person. She came up through Congress as a domestic policy person. She was California Attorney General. Unlike Joe Biden, the president she serves, she does not have that much experience in foreign affairs. And so I think part of this trip was also to shore her up in a way and to position her as a kind of leader who can go overseas and talk about things like military aid, like humanitarian assistance. We know that Poland is experiencing a flood of refugees and needs all kind of help, from food assistance to cash assistance, to support support the vast influx of Ukrainians who are flowing across the border.
Well, Russia continues to feel the economic heat after its invasion of Ukraine. McDonald's, Starbucks, Coca-Cola, and Pepsi all announced on Tuesday that they're suspending business in the country. Josh, Putin has since threatened to nationalize these private companies' assets. It's a move that's alarmed even some Russian oligarchs. What would it mean for him to do that?
That's not clear right now. A lot of people are looking at that as a threat, something that he's not really going to be able to pull off. I think that it's just another example of how Putin feels cornered by a lot of the, very taken by surprise by the unanimity of response at the sanctions around the world. I'm not sure how he could really nationalize that. I mean, some of these companies are franchise-based, like McDonald's. I do know from traveling in the region that they're very, very popular. So if you shut down McDonald's in countries like this, that's going to cause sort of a mild. I mean, they have a lot of bigger things to worry about, but that's it's a significant step for these countries to pull out. I don't think that Putin really knows what he's talking about and has really thought through the implications of trying to nationalize these companies. I think that they would probably just shut down, and they certainly don't have any fast food chains, to my knowledge, that would take their place. So it's just another weapon in the quiver, of sanctions and other efforts to try to influence Putin to back off.
Well, and help us better understand, Josh, the balance of power between Putin and the oligarchs.
That's a $1 million question, Jen. It had been assumed by the U.S. intelligence community and others that Putin controls the oligarchs. When they went to a capitalist system, these people were able to benefit immensely from that. They were all given controlled stakes in various sectors of the economy, monopolies as it were, and were able to become billionaires as a result. And then at one point, Putin said, I will take all that away from you, which is something he can do if you don't do what I tell you to do. But some of the oligarchs, like Oleg Deripaska, Roman Abramovich, some of the most influential ones and longtime allies of Putin, have spoken out publicly against the invasion. They've said this will not stand. And if enough of them flip and become opponents of Putin, he's in real trouble. They wield immense power in Russia and around the world.
And I just want to note the UN is now saying there's 2.5 million Ukrainian refugees. Now, Western news organizations have left Russia in droves after a new censorship law was passed last week. Under the law, independent journalists could receive prison time for up to 15 years for calling the war in Ukraine a war or an invasion. CBS, CNN, the BBC, and the New York Times are among the outlets that have suspended reporting in Russia. NPR is continuing to assess the situation. Anita, what does the suspension of these independent news organizations in Russia mean for the kind of information now available to Russians?
Yeah, it's a really important situation, or it's a really big problem actually, because as you know, the Biden administration and others have been saying from the beginning, for weeks, months really, that Russia is putting out a lot of misinformation. They've been very concerned about that from the beginning. Remember, before the invasion, Russia was saying, well, look, we can do this because, and they had listed all sorts of things that the United States said wasn't true, like Ukraine is going to attack, that there was humanitarian problems in Ukraine. So there's a lot of worry that if media outlets pull out or don't have that reporting out there, that no one is really going to know what's going on. And so it's interesting because some have decided to pull out. You mentioned NPR. There are others that don't really know what to do at this point. They don't want to be there and put their journalists in jeopardy. They also don't want to be there and, be worried about what is said. So it's a real predicament, and I think media outlets are still trying to figure out sort of what the next step is.
Josh, anything to add?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think one of the most significant parts of this is the social media component of it. Well, first of all, BBC has now resumed reporting in Russia, partially because of this double-edged sword where they feel like people really need that access. I think the other day, the biggest Google search in Russia was for BBC, just because they're dominant in the region. But, when you shut down access to Facebook and other social media platforms like Russia's doing, that is actually where a lot of those people get their information, and it's where they communicate, and they're able to sort of see what's happening outside of Russia. So, when Russia blocks access to Facebook,
He is my cute puppy. Oh, and anytime I ever sit on the ground, he instantly runs down there. You can see I put the blanket down. He laid there before I could even start working out. I don't work out much. This is the first of many, hopefully. Oh man, NPR is so funny. It makes me a little angry, so it's good workout. It's like workout music for me because it pumps me up. Just straight government propaganda.
You know, that's not something that Facebook did on their own, but it's a very serious concern because the Russians basically are just getting spoon-fed information from the government. And a lot of them are led to believe that this is basically a rescue mission in Ukraine, not a war crime in progress.
Well, this week, one more big sanction hit Russia from the White House.
Today, I'm announcing the United States is targeting the main artery of Russia's economy. We're banning all imports of Russian oil and gas and energy. That means Russian oil will no longer be acceptable at U.S. ports, and the American people will deal another powerful blow to Putin's war machine.
That was Biden speaking on Tuesday. Biden is also weighing putting new sanctions on Russian lawmakers. Josh, why make this move now, the significance of the timing?
Well, and the Biden administration has said all along that what they're trying to do is rolling sanctions and escalating sanctions, that if you impose all the sanctions at the beginning, then you're left with no leverage. So I think they're trying to, do this incrementally. There's a lot of people pushing back on that and saying you really need to sort of unload everything now and stop this, the genocide that's really happening in Russia. In Ukraine. So I think that that's why they're doing it. But I also think that they needed to take the temperature in Congress and find out if they could get the support for it, because they need Congress to do this too. And it does seem like Congress is on board. You had a lot of Republicans yesterday really outraged, testifying at committees, holding news conferences, saying that the Biden administration needs to do more. So I think that they would be on board with this.
How big of an impact could this have on the Russian economy, Josh?
I think it would have a huge economy on this. I mean, everybody has always said that the favored nation status and the trade status and even the oil sanctions are crippling blows. And so the problem with that is it's kind of a bludgeon approach where you really do hurt everyday Russians instead of just the government. But at this point, I think that they're looking at that as a way to possibly stop Putin because nothing else is really working so far. So, but yeah, I think it would, like you mentioned, there's only two other countries where we have this kind of draconian measure, and they're both really, really suffering because of it.
Anita, follow up on what Josh is saying there. What's the temperature in Congress right now when it comes to more sanctions being levied against Russia?
Well, there's definitely some that are lobbying the administration to go that route. I mean, remember there are some, particularly Republicans, who are critical of President Biden for not doing more in the lead up, right? Saying that he should have taken stronger action beforehand as a deterrent. So now that we're at this place, there are lawmakers that are lobbying him to do more, be more aggressive. Now, of course, a lot of this is politics, right? They're comparing to him to Donald Trump. They're comparing him to others. They're thinking about the midterms, but some of it is philosophical, some of it's political, and the Biden administration is sort of weighing what else they can do. It's clear that the United States has decided, yes, there's going to be humanitarian aid. Yes, there is going to be things that it's sending Ukraine, but that the economic hardship is really what its number one priority is, trying to really hurt Russia, and they think that this will work. And so I think that they are looking at all sorts of things.
In his announcement about banning Russian oil imports, Biden gave a stern warning to oil and gas companies too.
To the oil and gas companies and to the finance firms that back them. We understand Putin's war against the people of Ukraine is causing prices to rise. We get that. That's self-evident. But, it's no excuse to exercise excessive price increases or padding profits or any kind of effort to exploit this situation or American consumers, exploit them. Russia's aggression is costing us all, and it's no time for profiteering or price gouging.
The average price of gas in the U.S. is now more than $4.30 a gallon. Anita, we get a relatively small amount of our oil from Russia, so why are we seeing such a jump in gas prices right now?
right?
Yeah, it's a couple different things that we mentioned before that Russia is the keeper.
That's a massive fucking thing. Why are we spending so much in gas? Yeah, he's a cutie, isn't he? Why are we spending so much in gas when we get like less than 10% of our gas from freaking Russia? We're supposedly so close to energy independent, but yet our gas prices explode when there's a possibility of a war. Price gouging, maybe? Maybe price gouging. Maybe.
They're an exporter of American gas, sort of globally, and that Western allies sanctions have so far sort of carved out room for some of that to continue. That it's self-sanctioning. Some people, they don't want to have Russian products, right? And this is going to hurt. So this is not just the United States thing. This is overall. This is actually really interesting though, because as the United States, as we've seen gas go up, it's actually I think $5 in California. You have Republicans saying, hey, this isn't just about what's happening the last couple of weeks. It was already going up. And of course, that was true. If you remember, we have seen the gas prices tick up slowly. And we've seen Republicans say, look, President Biden is blaming this solely on Ukraine-Russia situation, but it's actually his economic policies, things that he's done over the last year to keep these up. So we've seen that divide there. It's we're also seeing that those that forecast what the prices are going to be, showing that the average price of gas is going to reach even higher, and it's going to probably remain over $4 until sort of end of the year towards the end of the year, November, December.
But Josh, we heard President Biden there include that warning about price gouging. Why did he need to do that?
Well, there's a congressman, John Garamendi from California, who said beginning a few weeks ago that the price of gas is going to go up because of the conflict, but that he wants an investigation into the gas companies because he thinks that there's some price gouging going on. And it's hard to tell exactly what he's basing that on, but there is a real concern that when you have crises like this, that especially when you have a economic sector like the oil and gas industry, that's they're if you notice, all their prices are always around the same price anyway. So, if there's any coordination on their part to jack up the prices more than they need to be because of this. So, that's a very serious concern if that's happening. It's really hitting Americans in the pocketbook at a time when they don't need it. So, I think that it's a valid concern, and I think it's something that probably should be looked into. So I think that probably plays into why Biden, at least Biden's mentioning that.
And is there a clear understanding, Anita, of how oil and gas companies are faring right now financially?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't really know. I mean, I think that a lot of this is moving really fast, right? This was just the other day, and we're seeing similar policies around the world, some of the United States allies. And so, we're going to continue to see how this impacts them.
Cheryl, before we move on, what are you watching for in the coming week or so as we continue to move through this crisis? Particularly, specifically about the war in Ukraine.
Yes, so I think what I'm watching for is continued bipartisanship, and I've been very struck by even when there's pressure among Republicans, say, for the president to do more in the way of sanctions or in the way of sending planes, you're also hearing similar sentiments from Democrats. Nancy Pelosi actually said this week at her press conference that she knew she wasn't a military strategist, but she saw those lines of Russian tanks, and boy, she really wished that we could send planes. And we saw 40 Republican senators send a letter to the White House saying, we'd like you to reconsider the decision on planes. I think that is very striking, and I also am interested in seeing the support among the American public. The president basically made an appeal with respect to gas prices to say, hey, prices, I'm doing this, taking this, making this oil sanction on Russia, and we've all got to maybe live with it a little bit and maybe sacrifice. And I do think that there's sentiment in the public to sacrifice for the needs of the Ukrainians and for that cause.
We're rounding up some of the week's biggest news, and we'll be back with more in just a moment. A reminder to have your questions answered on future topics, or just to let us know what you think, tweet us at 1A.
Support for NPR and the following message come from BetterHelp, offering online counseling. BetterHelp therapist Hesu Joe knows that lockdown has been hard on us as humans. We as people are hardwired to connect with others, which is why this whole time is so difficult. The connection that happens between people can be very powerful, and how healing it can be to have a healthy relationship with someone. To get matched with a counselor within 48 hours.
Hearing their stories reminding us that even when times are hard, we can still.
Okay, I just had to say, that when they're talking about gas prices and we're willing to pay more gas prices for the Ukrainian people. Why do gas prices not go up when there's a war in Syria via Israel, or why is there not gas prices going up because there's a war of Saudi Arabia against the Yemenis people? Those wars and actual oil gas fields don't seem to cause gas inflation, but a war in Ukraine over a pipeline does. That's fucking ridiculous. It's absolutely coordination. It's absolutely freaking, yeah, it's absolutely coordination. And the only reason the government's actually stepping up finally is because the American people see right through this bullshit, and they're like, oh, we have to do something. Yeah, it's just ridiculous. Just ridiculous. It's absolutely price gouging, and NPR is just going to roll over that. Why is NPR not going to talk about it or do anything about it? Is because NPR is owned and funded by Bill Gates and the Koch Foundation, which both of them have huge oil ties. So they're never actually going to dig into things. They're just going to paint over it like the AP. And maybe it's the energy drink, or not the energy drink, the keto-friendly workout drink, or maybe it's just my anger, but I'm ready to put some iron. All right, it's time for some push-ups because I'm mad.
Begin again. Listen to our new season wherever you get your podcasts.
You're listening to the News Roundup. Let's get back to the conversation. President Biden spoke earlier today. He said the U.S. will revoke Russia's most favored nation trade status. He also promised G7 countries will target the, quote, ill-begotten gains of Russian oligarchs. And that leads us to this tweet from Benjamin, who says, when will we seize oligarch property? Roman Abramovich has untouched real estate in New York City. Josh, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the Biden administration, some of the Republicans on the Hill have criticized them for being, one step behind Europe on a lot of these measures against Russia. And one of those is the seizures of the oligarch assets. I mean, the UK has really cracked down. Spain, France, and some other countries have seized the oligarchs' mega yachts, which is really making them very upset. Some of these things are 2 football fields long. One of them is about $800, $900 million, one of the Abramovich yachts. So, I mean, I think that there's a real big question here that sanctioning oligarchs and other financial elites is one thing. It's easy to sort of announce something, but to actually go after their assets, I've talked to some prosecutors, asset forfeiture people at the Justice Department, and that's a very arduous process. The Russian oligarchs have very, very big teams of lawyers, but I think it's something that needs to be done. I think if somebody put it on Twitter, you need to sort of put some chains on their propellers of their yachts. You could probably seize half of Trump Tower. Miami, Los Angeles, New York have all been geo-targeted by the Treasury Department because there's such a huge number of Russian oligarchs holding billions of dollars in assets there. And I think that that's one way to really get their attention and in turn have them get Putin's attention.
We also got this email from Larry who asks, with respect to sending aircraft to Ukraine, what is the problem? The United States sent aircraft to England prior to our involvement in World War II. This is certainly no different. Josh, can you give us some clarity about what we're hearing?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really, I'm glad you asked about that because there's a former National Security Council expert on Russia, Alexander Vindman. I don't know if you remember him. He was the one that spoke out about Trump and the, holding off Ukraine, giving them javelins. But he proposed yesterday that we reinstitute the Lend-Lease program, which is what we did in World War II. And that is basically where the United States or NATO members don't give them stuff. We just loan them stuff, and that includes military aid, medium and long-range air defense systems, anti-tank weapons, beyond the javelins that have already been provided, advanced extended anti-armor capabilities. And so by letting them borrow them, essentially, it's a way to do it much quicker with without a lot of the red tape, and then then we figure it out later. So to me, that's surprising that hasn't gotten more traction on the Hill and elsewhere. But that's a very good. He raises a very good point.
But Anita, once again, is there the political appetite for that kind of move?
Yeah, that's always the question, isn't it? It hasn't been so far, and it really doesn't sound like it. I mean, there's just sort of too many disagreements about that. And one thing that we've seen really from the beginning of this, despite the sort of partisan disagreements, some lawmakers saying the administration should be more aggressive, is that there's this sort of reluctance. We saw it during the Trump administration. We've seen it from President Biden and his administration, even from members of Congress, that we just don't want the United States to get sort of sucked into another conflict, right? With so many, so many years in other conflicts, that's been sort of something that even some Republicans and Democrats have agreed to. And, that's this obviously what we're talking about wouldn't necessarily mean that, but I think there's some concern that this could be a slippery slope.
Well, let's move on to a new study from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It shows that 4.3 million people in the U.S. quit or changed jobs in January. That's close to the record 4.5 million people who quit their jobs last November. Cheryl, what's at play here?
Well, I think a number of things are at play. One is the Great Resignation. The pandemic has really kind of changed the way a lot of people think about their lives, especially young people, and people have been resigning their jobs in droves. The other thing that's at play, though, is a very, very tight labor market. I mean, unemployment is down, and jobs are plentiful. So we're seeing a lot of churn, a lot of not only quitting jobs, but changing jobs. Workers really have the upper hand in this economy. I think the January report showed that employers hired 6.5 million people, but reported nearly twice that in job openings.
Courage and strength that's inspired not only
I think there are these two things that work, maybe both flowing out of the
appalling devastation and horror on Ukraine, bombing apartment buildings, maternity wards, hospitals.
Oh, okay. The Joe Biden's on. As much as I don't like Sleepy Joe, I was gonna check him out. Oh, holy crap. All I've had today is my water and my workout drink. I haven't had any protein yet. Did the late stream last night, so first workout in a long time. It's going to be a short workout today. Hopefully I can legitimately watch my progress on here with you guys and see. I work out a little longer every day, but we're at like 20 minutes of stretching, 10 minutes of workout. I need more, but
their own future. It's about making sure Ukraine will never be a victory for Putin, no matter what advances he makes on the battlefield. The American people are answering President Zelensky's call for more help, more weapons for Ukraine to defend itself, more tools to fight Russian aggression. And that's what we're doing. In fact, we started our assistance to Ukraine before this war began, as they started to do exercises along the Ukrainian border, the Russians, starting in March of last year. We took the threat of Putin invading very seriously, and we acted on it. We sent Ukraine more security assistance last year, $650 million in weapons, including anti-air and anti-armor equipment, before the invasion, more than we had ever provided before. So when the invasion began, they already had in their hands the kinds of weapons they needed to counter Russian advances. And once the war started, we immediately rushed $350 million in additional aid to further address their needs. hundreds of anti-air systems, thousands of anti-tank weapons, transport helicopters, armed patrol boats, and other high-mobility vehicles, radar systems that help track incoming artillery and unmanned drones, secure communications equipment and tactical gear, satellite imagery and analysis capacity. And it's clearly helped Ukraine inflict dramatic losses on Russian forces. On Saturday, my administration authorized another $200 million to keep a steady flow of weapons and ammunition moving to Ukraine. Now I'm once again using my presidential authority to activate an additional security assistance to continue to help Ukraine fend off Russia's assault, an additional $800 million in assistance. That brings the total of new U.S. security assistance to Ukraine to $1 billion just this week. These are direct transfers of equipment from our Department of Defense to the Ukrainian military to help them as they fight against this invasion. And I thank the Congress for appropriating these funds. This new package on its own is going to provide unprecedented assistance to Ukraine. It includes 800 anti-aircraft systems to make sure the Ukrainian military can continue to stop the planes and helicopters that have been attacking their people and to defend their Ukrainian airspace. And at the request of President Zelensky, we have identified and are helping Ukraine acquire additional longer-range anti-aircraft systems and the munitions for those systems. Our new assistance package also includes 9,000 anti-armor systems. These are portable, high accuracy shoulder-mounted missiles that the Ukrainian forces have been using with great effect to destroy invading tanks and armored vehicles. It'll include 7,000 small arms, machine guns, shotguns, grenade launchers to equip the Ukrainians, including the brave women and men who are defending their cities as civilians, and they're on the countryside as well. And as well as the ammunition, artillery, and mortar rounds to go with small arms, 20 million rounds in total, 20 million rounds. And this will include drones, which demonstrates our commitment to sending our most cutting-edge systems to Ukraine for its defense. And we're not doing this alone. Our allies and partners have stepped up to provide significant shipments of security assistance and will continue to help facilitate these deliveries as well. The United States and our allies and partners are fully committed to surging weapons of assistance to the Ukrainians. And more will be coming as we source additional stocks of equipment that we're ready to transfer. Now I want to be honest with you. This could be a long and difficult battle, but the American people will be steadfast in our support of the people of Ukraine in the face of Putin's immoral, unethical attacks on civilian populations. We are united in our abhorrence of Putin's depraved onslaught, and we're going to continue to have their backs as they fight for their freedom, their democracy, their very survival. And we're going to give Ukraine the arms to fight and defend themselves through all the difficult days ahead. We're going to continue to mobilize humanitarian relief to support people within Ukraine and those who have been forced to flee Ukraine. In just the past few weeks, we provided $300 million of humanitarian assistance to the people in Ukraine and in neighboring countries. Tens of thousands of tons of food, water, medicine, and other basic supplies to support the people in need. Our experts on the ground in Poland and Moldova and other neighboring countries are there to make real-time assessments of the rapidly evolving crisis to get urgently needed humanitarian supplies to the people in need when they need it. And we will support Ukraine's economy with direct financial assistance as well. And together with our allies and partners, we will keep up the pressure on Putin's crumbling economy, isolating him on the global stage. That's our goal. Make Putin pay the price, weaken his position, while strengthening the hand of the Ukrainians on the battlefield and at the negotiating table. Together with our allies and partners, we're going to stay the course, and we'll do everything we can to push for and end this tragic, unnecessary war. This is a struggle that pits the appetites of an autocrat against humankind's desire to be free. And let there be no doubt, no uncertainty, no question. America stands with the forces of freedom. We always have and we always will. I want to thank you all and God bless you. And I'm going to walk over and sign this bill to allow the drawdown of those materials. And may God protect their young Ukrainians who are out there defending their country.
I don't even know what to say to the end of that. What the fuck was that? What was that? The young Ukrainians. And bro, I'm gonna sign this. I'm gonna go sign. I'm gonna go sign the paper. Oh god. What was that? That was nuts. My workout break here. My smoke workout break. Since Biden remarked at a perfect time to stop. All right, yeah, that's. Now I'm just showing my YouTube. Nobody's on because I usually stream at midnight. This is fucking way early for me. All right, midnight Eastern Standard Time is when I usually do my Stony Progressive news clips, takedowns, all politics. That's why we took a workout break with Stony G there, Joe, Sleepy Joe. I got more energy stoned than that guy does awake. But he's got a lot of Adderall. And that end of just grab this, go sign the paper. Go sign the paper. Oh, what the fuck was that? He's talking about a war that we need to, stop, and we need to stop these endless wars. But yeah, why aren't we stopping our wars? Why do we have an active campaign in Somalia? Why are we helping Saudi Arabia bomb Yemen? Why are we helping? Why are we still actively bombing in Yemen? Like, we're actively bombing in 3 countries in Africa, and nobody knows that. Drone bombs killed 90% of civilians. That's been proven. Like, that's like U.S. stats. So, Sleepy Joe, you need to get your shit together. And why do we have billions of dollars to give to Ukraine when we don't have any money to give to the cities in America that need it? Our priorities are capitalism and war. It's not fucking American people, that's for sure. All right, I'm re-aggravated. I can get mad again. Let's listen to more crappy NPR and get aggravated and get through this workout. I'm gonna go back to the. I can't find my rubber band, so which is frustrating. But I'm gonna go back to the standing band, so I'll try to get an angle on that, and we'll.
Wednesday, President
Go back
Biden
there.
signed an executive order looking at cryptocurrency regulation. Anita, what's the administration's goal?
They really want to regulate cryptocurrencies, and it's something that's sort of fractured at best right now. There's just not a lot of regulation there, and so what President Biden is saying is he's basically directing federal agencies to produce a series of reports over months that's going to sort of lay out the future of the U.S. policy towards these digital assets, and even sort of left open the door of the possibility of launching a federally issued digital dollar. As we reported, that it was just something unthinkable, even a couple of years ago, that how much this has changed. Digital assets in the global market now value roughly 1.85 trillion. So it's something that's really happened quickly. It's something that President Biden and his administration have talked about doing, sort of left open the door to do, and they sort of want to look at sort of securing the United States' position as a leader in this industry, and what some of these reports will show will really impact how they're regulated and what the future will be.
Well, Josh, what do you think this could mean for cryptocurrency markets?
I think it's a huge step forward. I think it's huge news. And I think, as Anita said, this is another example of how the U.S. government was kind of trying to ignore an issue for the longest time as it was becoming bigger and bigger. And now they're basically trying to get ahead of it. So cryptocurrency, $1.85 trillion in digital assets around the world. It's a huge, it's a huge amount of money. But it's also a very significant national security threat. I mean, Russia, has been accused of using cryptocurrency to evade sanctions, ransomware, by Russia, other foreign powers, criminal organizations. They're all using cryptocurrency. So it is basically the coin of the realm of the dark underworld of the global economy, which is massive. So I think that what the Biden administration is trying to do is to regulate this in a way that allows innovation but mitigates risk to consumers, investors, and businesses. That's the way Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, and National Economic Council Director Brian Brian Deese put it when they issued the statement.
Well, lots of developments in the aftermath of January 6th this week. The first U.S. Capitol rioter, Guy Reffitt, was convicted this week in Texas, but he has reportedly said he will appeal. Josh, what can you tell us about the trial against Reffitt?
Well, this was a resounding victory for the Justice Department. It only took the jury about 3 hours to come back with a conviction. And so if he appeals, I believe he's probably got his work cut out for him. But I think that this is also a significant bellwether for all the other cases. I mean, when the Justice Department was investigating all of these, there's 700 investigations or more. There's at least 700 people charged. You know, I think it's very concerning for them if they lose the first case. But in this case, they won big, and they won pretty much everything they were trying to get. So this sends a message to everybody else who's been charged, who's on the verge of being prosecuted, who's under investigation, you know, that they could be in big trouble. You know, this is the way that the American people, at least if the jury is representative of them, feels about this. And a lot of the other cases are very similar. So, you know, these guys are probably scrambling to talk to their lawyers and see if they can, you know, try to arrange some kind of plea agreements. But so I do think it's a very significant victory for the Justice Department.
Well, the Proud Boys leader, Enrique Tarrio, was also arrested and charged with conspiracy related to the attack on the Capitol, even though he wasn't in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. Cheryl, what does his arrest mean for other leaders of these extremist groups?
Well, I think his arrest sends a clear warning signal to other leaders of the extremist groups that whether you were in Washington, D.C. or not, your work on behalf of these groups that led the attack on the Capitol, you'll be held to account for that work. As Josh said, this victory, these two things are not disconnected. The conviction of Guy Wesley Reffitt and the indictment of the Proud Boys leader are kind of connected. I think the Justice Department sees its cases building. They had this big victory, and they are going to go after the people who planned and executed this insurrection as aggressively as they possibly can.
Anita, all of the charges we've been mentioning are coming from the Department of Justice and their investigation. But what's the latest on the House Committee's investigation?
Yeah, the committee continues on, but remember, of course, the committee isn't going to be criminally charging anyone. So what we'll see from the House Committee is what we've been saying, more and more information about what happened, not just that day, but, you know, in the weeks prior to that. You know, we've seen that they focused on President Trump. We've seen that they focused on President Trump's top aides. What that does, I think, different, obviously, than Department of Justice criminal charges, is paint us a picture, really tells us what was going on, who was involved, and all that. It really puts those things together. So they continue to investigate, and we continue to see whether, you know, as they ask people to come forward with documents, with talking to the investigators, some are cooperating, some aren't, and we will eventually see a sort of a greater picture of what happened.
Let's turn to a spate of bills targeting LGBTQ young people and their families. They're making their way through state legislatures. On Tuesday, the Idaho House of Representatives passed a bill that would make it a crime for parents to seek gender-affirming health care for their transgender child. Local TV station KTVB in Boise interviewed Bree Latimer, a Boise State student who knew she wanted to transition from a young age.
I mean, how old were you when you knew that you were a woman? That's how old I was, too.
She says hormone replacements and puberty blockers changed her life for the better.
Once you go through therapy, you figure out all these different things about yourself. Things finally start making sense in hindsight. And then taking that step to starting hormone replacement therapy or puberty blockers. At that point, I feel like you are more sure of your identity than you ever have been in your entire life. I was suffering from anxiety, depression, and starting HRT, it's like, it was like, it just kind of got turned off.
Also this week, Florida's Republican-dominated legislature passed a bill that would ban teaching about sexual orientation and gender identity to K-3 students. Opponents have dubbed it the Don't Say Gay bill.
I think that you have seen the president speak passionately about his view that a bill like this, a bill that would discriminate against families, against kids, put these kids in a position of not getting the support they need at a time where that's exactly what they need, is discriminatory. It's a form of bullying. It is horrific.
That was White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki condemning the bill on Wednesday. We got this tweet from Megan who says, I've been working a long time to curb anti-LGBTQ bullying by students in schools, only to have adults jump in to become the bullies. If this continues, I fear we are going to lose kids to suicide. Cheryl, there's the Idaho bill criminalizing parents who seek gender-affirming health care for their children. There's the Florida bill, again, opponents call it the Don't Say Gay bill. Last week, Iowa banned transgender girls and women from competing in sports according to their gender identity. And there are 30 similar pieces of Republican-backed legislation that have been proposed around the country this year. What do these bills indicate to you about where we are right now?
I think these bills indicate that the Republican Party is frankly playing politics with the lives of transgender people. I think we need to be clear. The medical profession is behind gender-affirming care for transgender people. In February, the American Academy of Pediatrics said in a statement that for young people who identify as trans, studies show that this kind of care can reduce emotional distress and reduce the risk of suicide. I think we're also seeing, frankly, a solution without a problem. The Iowa bill in particular, banning trans girls from sports. This is a very, very rare instance. A lot of conservatives have pointed to the case of Leah Thomas. She's a University of Pennsylvania swimmer and a trans woman who is about to compete in the NCAA championships. As a man, when she was swimming on the men's team, she was sort of a middling swimmer, and now she is a very successful women's swimmer. But this is a very, very rare and unusual case. And what these kinds of bills do is really send a terrible message to young people who are struggling with their gender identity. And I might note that this is not high on the list of Americans' concerns. In the latest Gallup poll, fewer than 1% of Americans listed gay rights as a top concern for them.
That's Cheryl Gay-Stolberg, a Washington correspondent with the New York Times. Also with us today, Anita Kumar, the senior editor of Standards and Ethics at Politico, and Josh Meyer, a domestic security correspondent for USA Today. Cheryl, Anita, Josh, thanks for being with us today. 1A's audio engineer and sound designer is Mike Kidd. He gets technical assistance from Adrian Danhauser. Aileen Humphreys is the producer and editor of 1A On Demand, and Chris Castano is our digital editor. You're listening to the News Roundup. We'll discuss the week's biggest headlines from around the world in just a moment. This is 1A.
Support for NPR and the following message come from BetterHelp, offering online counseling. BetterHelp therapist Hesu Joe knows that lockdown has been hard on us as humans. We as people are hardwired to connect with others, which is why this whole time is so difficult. The connection that happens between people can be very powerful, and how healing it can be to have a healthy relationship with someone. To get matched with a counselor within 48 hours and save 10%, go to betterhelp.com/1A.
You're listening to the 1A podcast. It's time for the global edition of the News Roundup. It's been a week of some political drama in South Korea. There's a prospect that Venezuela might be let back in from the cold, and a remarkable story from an icy seabed. But of course, one story dominates all others.
It's just an awful, awful scene, and these people are the lucky ones. Можно вам помочь? I'm just going to help her carry this bag a second. Excuse me, John. A lot of these people have no idea where they're going to go once they cross this bridge. They know that they're in relative safety once they do it. We're still hearing the steady thud of artillery in the distance, and the fear is, John, it's just going to keep getting closer.
That's CNN's Clarissa Ward. And thanks to a number of foreign news teams, all of us here can see for ourselves the devastation currently being brought to bear on the people of Ukraine. Let's get to it with our panel. Our guests today are Dave Lawler, World News Editor for Axios. Dave, great to have you back.
Great to be with you.
David Rennie, Beijing Bureau Chief for The Economist. David, always a pleasure.
Hello.
and Sean Carberry. Sean is the founder of the foreign policy website Taimani1. He's reported from more than 24 countries, including Iraq, Syria, Libya, and Yemen, and he was NPR's correspondent in Afghanistan. Sean, thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you, Jen.
So, Dave, I know it's hard to know where to begin, but what do we know about how Putin's invasion is going and the efforts to agree on a ceasefire?
Yes, so in terms of how the invasion is going, we still have Russian troops massing near Kyiv, the capital. They have made some progress in recent days, but the Pentagon continues to say that they're stalled outside of the city for the time being. Other cities around the country are surrounded, including Mariupol in southeastern Ukraine, where we have a pretty terrible humanitarian situation unfolding. In terms of the ceasefire side, we did get a meeting between the foreign ministers of Ukraine and Russia. That's the highest level at which they've met during the crisis. They did not resolve anything on the ceasefire front, though they did discuss the prospect of the presidents potentially meeting Putin and Zelensky. For the time being, the U.S. does not think that Putin is seriously looking for an off-ramp here. They expect him to continue to push forward, but there are a few countries attempting to mediate and try to get to some form of ceasefire in the coming days.
Well, there's been international outrage at Russia's decision to bomb a maternity hospital this week. Western reporters asked Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, to justify the attack on Wednesday. This is how he responded.
With regard to the maternity hospital, it's not the first time we see pathetic outcries concerning the so-called atrocities perpetrated by the Russian military. The public opinion is manipulated worldwide. Today I saw the reports of your channel and other Western media, very emotional, but unfortunately the other side is not looked at.
Sean, what more do we know about this attack?
Well, as you heard, the Russians are denying that they essentially attacked a hospital. They have said that it had been taken over by militias and extremists, and therefore it was targeted for that reason. But witness accounts, footage that we've all been seeing over the last couple of days show very dramatically that there were pregnant women, children in this facility.
I can't even anymore. Those guys. 50 minutes of an hour and a half, and I can't even anymore. Alright, I got a little more stretching to do before I sit down and wrap up today, but Jesus. A1, you suck. 1A, sorry. A1 sucks too. Just sugar water. I think this is what I wanted to try out. Another 1A.
This message comes from NPR sponsor ADP. Leveraging data-driven insight.
Kicks off in Qatar. Allegations of vote buying and human rights abuses have marred the run-up to the competition. Some fans are even threatening a boycott, but Qatar says it deserves to host the Cup.
FIFA and UEFA have just released a joint statement confirming that Russia are being banned from football. That means the Russian national team and also all Russian clubs.
From the Winter Olympics in China to the World Cup in Qatar, 2022 has a full calendar year of high-stakes sporting events. But the stakes are even higher when you look at the host country's human rights records. Authoritarian leaders have used the power of sports to improve a country's public image for a long time. It's a phenomenon called sports washing. After the break, we'll look at the impact of sports washing on a country's reputation, and we'll also discuss how it's being used as a tool in Russia's war against Ukraine. I'm Jonquilyn Hill, in for Jen White. You're listening to the 1A podcast, where we get to the heart of the story. A reminder, to have your questions answered on future topics, or just to let us know what you think, tweet us at 1A.
Life Kit is like your friend with really good advice.
So, can I really be truthful?
Yeah.
It's just me and you, right?
Well, sure. Let's say it is.
3 times a week, Life Kit is in your feeds with episodes on health, personal finance, personal growth, and so much more. Listen to Life Kit from NPR.
Support for NPR and the following message come from BetterHelp, offering online counseling. BetterHelp therapist Hesu Joe knows that lockdown has been hard on us as humans.
We as people are hardwired to connect with others, which is why this whole time is so difficult. The connection that happens between people can be very powerful, and how healing it can be to have a healthy relationship with someone.
To get matched with a counselor within 48 hours and save 10%, go to betterhelp.com/1A. Support for NPR and the following message come from BetterHelp, offering online counseling. BetterHelp therapist Hesu Joe knows that lockdown has been hard on us as humans.
We as people are hardwired to connect with others, which is why this whole time is so difficult. The connection that happens between people can be very powerful, and how healing it can be to have a healthy relationship with someone.
To get matched with a counselor within 48 hours and save 10%, go to betterhelp.com/1A.
Hey people, the Wait Wait Don't Tell Me podcast has a brand new show on Wednesdays with me, Emma Choi. It's called Everyone and Their Mom. Whatever everyone is talking about, that's what we'll be talking about, with Wait Wait panelists, comedians you love, and people you don't even know you love yet. Just listen to the Wait Wait Don't Tell Me podcast on NPR, wherever you get your podcasts, and I'll be there every Wednesday. 2 great shows in one feed.
Over this last year and a half, the world's been joining us now is Kareem Zidane.
He's an investigative journalist covering the intersection of sports and politics. He writes for outlets like The Guardian and The New York Times. Kareem, thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and as far as stretching goes, my rule is always, if it feels like you still need to stretch, you keep stretching. Certain things hurt, you keep stretching. As a bartender, my back and shoulders are the ones that take the brutal beating, so you'll notice I do a lot of hip, a lot of back, and a lot of shoulder stretching, because that is what takes my beating at the bar.
Also with us,
And a million other professions do the same thing. I mean, I'm not special in any means. I'm just a bartender server, so as a bartender, I use my shoulders a lot.
Drea Florence. She's the acting director of the Sports and Rights Alliance. It's a partnership of 9 nonprofit organizations, including Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, and the Committee to Protect Journalists. Hi, Andrea.
Hi, John Glenn. Thank you so much for having us.
Kareem, let's start with you. How do you define the term sports washing?
Well, that's a great question, John Glenn. Honestly, I'd say that sports washing, first of all, is a term that was coined by Amnesty International in 2018. It was coined to describe how authoritarian regimes use sports to manipulate international perception and to cleanse their human rights atrocities at the same time. Now, this term may be new, but the process isn't. Now, states as far back as the ancient Egyptians, who used to stage wrestling matches against Nubia to showcase Pharaoh's superiorities, existed for a very long time. We can go back and look at the 1936 Olympics in Berlin as well, which is where Hitler's Nazi party attempted to emphasize superiority of the Aryan race. But in modern times, sports washing has become a lot more complex, let's say. It's much more of a soft power strategy now. It is used as a multi-layered process that can achieve a wide range of goals rather than a single aim at this point. So, like, for example, you've got countries like Russia and China using it as a form of diplomacy and a way to alter any negative perception on the international stage.
I'm going to go ahead and guess that they're not going to talk about the fact that America uses it to whitewash inner cities. Like, oh, inner cities are so bad. Look at how these amazing athletes come up from them and do such amazing things. And then they give back to their super poor communities. That's sports washing too. They're not going to talk about that at all. At all, I guarantee it.
But you have countries like Saudi Arabia who are using it to distract from human rights abuses, as well as wars in places like Yemen. So there are really examples that are seemingly never ending at this point.
So in your Guardian piece from earlier this year, you suggested that 2022 could be the year of sports washing. Where else have we seen this phenomenon used? You gave us a lot of examples. Are there any others?
Well, I mean, the reason I was saying 2022 in particular was going to be a sports washing year is because it was bookended by the Beijing Olympics, and at the end of the year, we're going to have the Qatar World Cup. Now, there's plenty of other sports washing that takes place throughout the year in places like Saudi Arabia. We had an example with Rwanda last year with the NBA. there are countless examples. I mean, right now you've got Bahrain is about to host the Formula One Grand Prix again. Saudi Arabia hosts the Formula One Grand Prix as well. There are really countless examples all over the place. But what was very significant about 2022 is the fact that two of the major sporting events of the world, global events of extreme significance, such as the Olympic Games and the World Cup, both being held in authoritarian regimes, one at the start of the year, one at the end of the year. This is something we have not seen before, and it's very significant. And the fact that very few people are really emphasizing this goes to show you how successful sports washing has been.
Andrea, you're joining us from Rio de Janeiro, and that's where the 2014 World Cup was, and also the 2016 Olympic Summer Games. How did you see this phenomenon firsthand as a way to distract from human rights violations that happen there?
So here in Brazil, we saw a phenomenon that was hosting two mega sporting events in a very short period of time. Of course, our partners were closely tracking the very different human rights violations before, during, and after those events. We saw entire communities being forcibly removed without any prior compensation or knowledge or warning. We saw increased police violence due to the security around those events. We also saw how Rio and Brazil were more militarized as well because of those events, and the entire security force had a big impact. But I also wanted to highlight that in terms of sports washing, we would not see that happening, what we saw in Rio and in Brazil because of the World Cup, if we had human rights as part of the bid criteria and host city selection process. The same is true for the events happening this year. If sports governing bodies would have embedded human rights earlier and included human rights as part of the awarding of the games, we would not be watching the games or the World Cup going to countries that are, for instance, committing crimes against humanity or that are silencing their own athletes when they come forward.
Are we seeing that criteria change?
So we saw some change since 2017. FIFA made important progress following, of course, big campaigns and advocacy work from civil society and trade unions. So FIFA, for instance, adopted Article 3 in their statutes, which includes human rights criteria, and they've also adopted a human rights policy. Now the big challenge when it comes to FIFA is implementation. So how can we make sure that this criteria are used in all of the selection processes, and this cannot be done on an on-off basis. It needs to be systemic. We're also, another challenge is around monitoring and remedy. So how can we make sure that human rights impacts around these events are actually monitored and, most importantly, remedied in case violations happen? When it comes to the Olympic Committee, in 2017, they announced the inclusion of human rights criteria for the first time in the host city contract for the 2024 and 2028 Olympic Games. Then later on, we saw in 2019 an independent review into the IOC's human rights obligations, which was published at the end of 2020. But since this report came out, we have not seen a human rights policy or a human rights high-level commitment by the International Olympic Committee, and that's part of the asks from the Sporting Rights Alliance following the Winter Olympic Games.
So, Kareem, Russian President Vladimir Putin successfully lobbied to host the 2014 Winter Olympics in Sochi and the 2018 World Cup. Here's Putin speaking in a welcome address back in 2018. I welcome football supporters and the best football teams on the planet. All those have already come to Russia and those who are getting ready to take part in the greatest international event.
Yeah, so they're not going to talk about that at all, huh? I feel good and loose. I'm going to drink some water, I've been hitting these chillums that are really small for me, so I'm going to hit another chillum, drink some water. We'll listen to one more NPR cast before I go jog the dog. And that's going to be my cool down is going to be a nice light jog for the dog. Dog deserves all the walks, right? He absolutely deserves all the walks. I know I had one more saved. Oh shit. I had a few things saved. Mother shit. Oh. Do this. Fresh air.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Fundrise, a platform that makes investing in high-end real estate easy. You tell Fundrise your investing goal.
Many of us first got to know him when he anchored Weekend Update on Saturday Night Live, a position he held from 2006 to 2013. He was also a head writer on the show. He's written a new children's book called I'm Not Scared, You're Scared. The story is about a bear and his best friend, a rabbit. The bear is afraid of everything, even his own face in the mirror. The rabbit loves risky adventures. By the end of the story, the bear has shown that when he's called on to have courage to rescue his rabbit friend, he can do what needs to be done. Seems like a very timely children's book. Seth Meyers' main job is as a comic. He opens each episode of Late Night with a monologue about the day's news, and then does his segment, A Closer Look, which is a comic deep dive on one issue in the news. Let's start with a segment from last Wednesday's Closer Look. He was talking about the Biden administration's new ban on all Russian energy imports.
All right. So, as with every workout, you should always, I start before the workout, I have a couple cups of water. Workout, drink during the water, during water, and finish with water. So I'm going to drink these couple cups before I take my light jog with the dog. I got some Jack Hur today. Jack Hur, it's a popular strain. Good solid sativa for my daytime workout / cleaning afterwards. And then getting ready for my Weed Wednesday, Stony Progressive around midnight. My normal stream. So yeah, Dureg 16. So yeah, I will be streaming tonight around midnight like usual, but I am going to smoke. We'll listen to one more clip of NPR before I head out for my jog, and see you guys tonight. And yeah, I'm gonna work out. I'm gonna try to work out every day, but I'll post my workouts at least once a week. Change it up, see how the evolution happens. My light workout for day 1. Next week's day 7 will be a little better. Maybe day 8. We'll see what day I have off, and we'll just kind of build up. I like the idea. Daytime stream once a week. But yeah, we'll do Weed Wednesday tonight. I'm gonna smoke a bowl and let's finish up some NPR. This is Seth Meyers. So a little lighter side of things. Seth Meyers on fear, fatherhood, and friendship. Seth Meyers does pretty good shows as far as his political commentary. I think he's a corporate stooge, so I'll watch TV or episodes that he's in. But as far as a news commentator, I don't respect his opinion.
Where we derive our energy from clean, renewable sources would be so much better for so many obvious reasons, including the fact that it would take power away from oppressive oil-based dictatorships. Right now, they have far too much power over both global and domestic politics because, as you've probably noticed, gas prices hit a record high this week. The numbers are so shocking. I drove by a station that had viewer discretion advised on the sign. Both Republicans and Democrats had called on Biden to ban Russian energy, both parties. And yet, you probably won't be shocked to learn that Republicans also attacked him for high gas prices, like Tennessee Senator Marsha Blackburn, who tweeted under President Trump, gas was about $2.17 in 2020. That's true. And famously, that was the only thing happening in 2020. The low gas year, as we called it. I'm just spitballing here, but maybe low gas prices had something to do with the fact that we're all trapped in our homes and no one was going anywhere. Price goes down when demand goes down. That's why you can get a DVD player for like $11 now, or a Walmart card for free. Not now. It's easy to lower gas prices when no one is using gas to commute or travel or fly on airplanes. That's like presiding over a zombie apocalypse and bragging that rents are lower than ever. But yeah, now that you do mention it, I do remember when I was fleeing the city to avoid a highly contagious respiratory virus that decimated the U.S. economy and trapped everyone.
I know 85% of my people that watch these videos are later, but let me know in the comments or, shoot something, guys. Do you think this guy is freaking, legitimately pays his audience to laugh at this shit? Because I'll smile at some of it, but none of it's funny. None of it's, the way they're laughing funny. Oh, my goodness.
As we record this on Tuesday, March 8th, when we broadcast this, I hope Zelensky is still alive.
So this was a week ago on my birthday, so that's funny. This was last week. And this corporate tool, he's a good comedy writer, but his political takes again are just center, and just for the most basic of intellects. Again, he can be a funny person, but his political commentary is not. I mean, he's not a political scientist. He's a fucking comedian. He's a Saturday Night Live stooge, whatever.
What to expect, but
I like him as a
what
artist,
does it mean to you
not as
that President Zelensky was a
political
comic? He was
commentator.
a comic actor. He was in a comedy group before he was on television. What's it like for you as a comic writer and performer to think about that?
Every night my wife says, "Don't get any ideas." That's the main thing when I come home. But I think that the part of it that is the most impressive to me as I watch this is how well, look, I'm not saying any of it is performative, right? This is a person who is taking very real risks and has to rise to the occasion. But we're living in a time where, as a world leader, everything is recorded as we go through this crisis. And it seems to me that he has not has not wrong-footed any moment here. It's almost like the way someone on stage, particularly a comedian, is in control of the narrative for the court.
Yes, we're in control of the narrative. That's the whole fucking point, man. Ugh. Sorry if you just seriously, come on. We're in control of the narrative. Two corporations own everything on the planet. What are you talking about, man? Fucking.
So however long they're on stage, and they are trying to, convince the audience to hold the opinion they hold, often and almost entirely for comic effect. But I think he's using a lot of the same tools here, and he clearly knows how to appeal to people, and he's incredibly appealing. And I can't imagine what the people of Ukraine would be going through right now if they didn't have a leader who had been this short-handed so far.
And it's just great that he's using all that charisma to tell the truth and to convey genuine need, as opposed to using it to manipulate people or offer disinformation.
Yeah, and even just...
Okay, I'm sorry my political views are too much for health and fitness, but what the fuck are they talking about? Every time I hear the U.S. say something, I'm like, we could be talking about ourselves or Russia or China or anybody. All the big governments do this shit, and it's just bad faith reporting or bad faith political commentary if you don't admit that we do it too. Russia does it, but so do we. And if you're just, I don't know, it's acting like Russia's the enemy of all enemies and everybody else is horrible, everybody else is fine. Everybody else is great. Everything is fine. Everything is wonderful when you're a tool. Or something like that, right? Something like that. Trademarked somebody else.
It's weird to, and again, this is going to continue to be less weird because, there'll be more younger leaders, or I should say leaders younger than us, who know how to use their front-facing cameras and know how to turn it around while they're walking down a hallway, as opposed to, I think we sometimes see older politicians try to use social media in a way that becomes very clear that it has just been taught to them moments before. So there's something very authentic about the way he's using modern technology and modern communication devices and means to get through to his people at a time where they need to hear from him.
You got your start in a tragic time on TV doing comedy, because your first show on Saturday Night Live was the season opener after 9/11. So, like, what a time to start on TV and to start doing comedy on TV. Did Lauren, like, take everybody in the cast aside and say, it's going to be hard to find what's funny, here's what we do? Did he give you any advice on that?
It's all such a blur to me that time for so many reasons. I think it would have been a blur if I had started SNL in 1998 when it wasn't a time like that. I think that for the people that were closer to the power structure of the show at the time, the head writers, the cast members who've been there for a long time, I think those are probably the people that Lauren powwowed with more as far as just how to approach that time. It was a whirlwind for me. I'd also only lived in New York City for 2 weeks before 9/11, so I had a lot going on, but it wasn't an easy time to write sketch comedy, I will say.
And so I'm sure you do remember, in spite of the fact that that period is a blur, that in the opener, then New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani was there, and there were like people from the fire department and the police department who were like heroes. And Giuliani is there because he was considered a heroic figure then, bringing together New York in the spirit of courage. And so Lorne Michaels says to Rudy Giuliani, "Is it okay to be funny?" And Giuliani says, "Why start now?" And when you think about who Giuliani has become and all the jokes you've made subsequently about Giuliani,
it's not who he has become; it's who he is. It's who he is. He was the same person then as he is now. It's just a fucking spectacle made him look good. Like, Jesus Christ. These are supposed to be intellectuals, right? Like, these are supposed to be really smart people, and they fucking narrate like they're paid by the fucking Bill Gates Foundation. Oh, wait, they are. Half of their funding comes from Bill Gates. It's like 40% comes from Bill Gates, 40% comes from the fucking Coke Industries and other private companies. And then like 20% comes from viewers like you, which is why I don't pay for fucking anything. Never have, never will.
Does your head spin a little bit?
They were way better before 2010. The last 12 years, NPR has gone downhill with a crashing, like everybody else has.
It does spin. Bernie Carrick was there as well, another person who fell from grace post that moment. And it does spin. And I remember a few years later, when he was running for president, Rudy Giuliani came on Weekend Update, and he was someone that I continued to have a great deal of respect for. Our politics didn't align, but having lived in New York City in 2001, he did mean something to me. And there was a charm to him.
Is there any speculation that any other mayor would have stepped up and done something like, oh my God, he did something no other human would have done? No. No. That's just ridiculous. They shouldn't be political commentators if they can't actually dissect the moment, if they can't actually look at it with critique. They shouldn't be political commentators. They should be, I don't know what they should be. They should be in their little circles and their $1 million dinners and not talk about politics. This is going well.
The poll, the charisma of Rudy Giuliani. So it is beyond head spinning to see where this has been, and the fact that I remember once being in an elevator with him a few years after that 2001 season premiere, where I was a new cast member who I think had one line in the show. He walked on an elevator with me and knew my name, and I thought, wow, this guy is a very good, very charming politician. So it's a very hard thing to watch, and I imagine even harder for those who believed in him politically and believed in what he stood for.
Well, I want to get back a little later to talking about late night, but I want to talk with you about your new children's book, which I really like. It's called I'm Not Scared, You're Scared.
There we go.
And I should mention, you did not do the illustrations. You did the writing.
Yes, thank you very much for giving credit where credit's due.
Rob Saya Jr. Let's give Rob Saya Jr. a shout out there.
So I'd actually like you to read from the beginning of the book.
Oh my God, of course it's a fucking promo. I should have known, it doesn't say promo in the title. It doesn't say he's here to promote a book. They start out with politics, and then they go promo. And then they'll talk a little bit about the subject of the book, but then it's just mostly promotion for his book. So viewers like you will go out and buy this book, or some kid you know or something. I don't know. Ugh.
There once was a bear who was easily scared. Each night before going to sleep, he would tie a bell to his door that would make a noise if anyone tried to sneak in, because even a bear who is easily scared is a very heavy sleeper. He was even afraid of his own reflection, and because he couldn't see himself, he never brushed well and always had food stuck in his teeth. When you're a scared bear with food in your teeth, you don't have many friends. Bear had one, Rabbit. Rabbit was never scared. She read scary stories, she slept with her door wide open, and she brushed her teeth while hanging from a tree branch by her ears. This gave her very strong ears.
Oh my God.
One day, Rabbit made an announcement. Bear, we are going on an adventure. Bear suggested that instead of going on an adventure, they could read a book about adventures. That way, if anything goes wrong, we can just close the book. Rabbit looked at...
That's what I want to do. I want to close his book. I don't want... Yeah, I can't even... Wow, that was just... I'm sorry, I'm fucking... It's like not watching mainstream media for 15, 20 years, never really falling into it. I like a little bit of soccer, a little college basketball, but I don't watch it on TV. I watch, bullshit Reddit streams and stuff so that I don't have to see the commercials. And I don't know the whole pop culture and stuff like that, man. It's just, my bullshit meter is too sensitive. Like, he makes me mad. This is just such, it's like, hey, I got bored during COVID and I wrote this thing, and because I'm famous, somebody's gonna buy it. I don't know. I'm gonna skip ahead and see if there's something else.
I think that's one of the biggest upsides of being friends with incredibly funny people is they're going to have an ability, be it with the things they're going through or with the things you're going through, to find humor in it, and that will then make the passage through those tricky times a little bit easier to bear. And also with John's story, particularly, when he tells it on our show or when he tells it on stage, I really hope that it brings comfort to other people who have been through it, be it on John's side of it or the rest of us that had to make that, difficult to.
There are better comics out there than Seth Meyers for comedy, for political comedy, for any type of comedy. He's just okay in everything. I don't know. This old Saturday Night Live stuff was kind of funny, and The Incredibles was a pretty good show. I'll give you that. That's what I'm going to say on that subject. And with that being said, I got to take this energy, take it outside, right? I got to finish my energy with a little jog with the dog. I've got about half of Voss in me. That's what. Shit. Not enough yet. Almost 2 cups of water. 2 cups of water to help flush things out. 2 cups is always the goal. 2 cups before dinner. 2 cups when you wake up. Run the system. And I'm going to take the dog for a jog, come back. I do a vegan smoothie with berries, hemp milk, and I guess I should pull it out. I just finished my other one yesterday, so got to start a new one today. Finished it. I go through this and chocolate protein shakes pretty heavily. So today is going to be my fruit one. It's a mixed berries, blueberries, raspberries, blackberries, a little bit of pomegranate seeds, frozen with vegan Vega protein. Got 20 grams of protein per scoop and a handful of other nutrients. and that with some hemp seed milk, and that'll be my protein when I get back. So that's my workout day today. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for watching later. Like I said, 85%, 90%, 85% people watch later. So thanks for checking it out. And I'll see you guys tonight at midnight for my Weed Wednesday. My Weed Wednesday at midnight tonight. And we're going to talk about some medical states, some voting issues. Talk a lot about voting tonight, I think, because primary season, we just had primaries in Florida. So I want to kind of review that tonight on my political show. And everything's politics with me. I'm a political junkie. So if I'm working out, it's politics. If I'm hiking with my buddies, we're talking politics usually. It's just what I do. So I'm a political junkie. So yeah, thanks for stopping in. I will talk tonight about some weed, politics, and legalizing and all those good ballot initiatives that we have to talk about. And thanks for the subscribe, do-rag. And we'll see you guys tomorrow. Or tonight. Whatever. After midnight Eastern, so it's technically tomorrow for me. But for most of you, maybe today. I don't know. Peace out. Gonna go run.